Rolling. Is there a particular memory of your father that, to you, characterizes his personality, and can you describe it?
Well, probably the first thing that I remember about my dad was he used to pick me up and carry me on his shoulders and up and down stairs, and he was a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. He never made much money, but he did have a good sense of humor, and I think that's the thing I remember the most about him, was laughing.
Okay. Rolling again. 2. How old were you when your father left?
I think I was either between 10 or 11 when he was drafted. I'm guessing like 1943, so that would make me 11. Probably 11.
Okay. Question 3. Can you remember the day you learned your father was leaving? And if so, can you relate the story?
Well, that's kind of foggy in my memory, but I do remember he left. We had to go to the railroad station in Jamestown, the Erie Railroad. I had a junction point there, and there were probably, I don't know, I'm going to guess 10 to 15 men from Faulkner who'd been drafted, who were leaving at the same time, heading for their basic.
Okay. Question number 4. When was the last you heard from him, be it spoken word or written letter, that you can remember? And do you remember what he said?
Well, the last time I remember talking with my father was when he came home from basic training. He was home either for a week or 10 days, something like that. And there again, it was sort of a happy time. That there wasn't much thought of what was going to come later. But that's kind of a foggy memory to me, because I was, like I say, 10 or 11, and it was all sort of a big deal. My dad was going to war and this type of thing. So it was a happy time again.
Okay. So if I remember correctly, what was number 5?
I do remember the last written communique that I seen from my dad was written to my aunt. It was an victory mail sent to her, and it had information relative to, I'm not sure if it was Ireland, Scotland, England, or he was there then. He was just before the invasion of France. He was, I think it was Ireland. And it was all about the weather being wet, cold, and he was kind of miserable. It wasn't a very upbeat communique.
Okay, is that it? Okay. Number 5. Do you remember the day that you received notification that your father was dead or wounded? And if so, can you relate the story?
I remember both days. First day, when he was wounded, we received a telegram. Western Union office was only a block away from where we lived, and it was delivered to our apartment, which was on the 3rd floor of an apartment building. And I remember the young man coming with it and knocking on the door, and I remember us my mother answering, and it sort of was a shock to everybody. However, there was a little bit of relief when we found out the telegram was informing us that he had been wounded and that he was in a hospital. So it wasn't as sad a situation as it could have been or was going to be. But I do remember that, yes.
Okay, do you remember the day that you received the telegram that he was no longer alive?
Yeah, well, it was, I don't know, a week, 10 days after that, that the same individual came upstairs to the door, and of course, there was some apprehension. I know I didn't feel it anywhere near as much as my grandparents and my mother, but you didn't know whether he was getting better or what that news was going to be. Of course, I can remember the young man with Western Union did not look happy, and of course when he opened up the telegram, well, it was the fact that Dad had died of his wounds. So that was a very emotional, sad time. I didn't realize really how emotional or how sad. I wasn't really old enough at that point to get the impact of what had just happened.
Right. Okay, so number 6. Upon looking at military records, it was discovered that there seemed to be some confusion for a significant period of time after Ed's reported death that he might have been still alive. Do you remember how this confusion might have affected your family?
I really don't. I do remember something from the standpoint of the family, my grandfather Roberts, and everybody thinking that he might have been missing in action rather than have been killed. But I don't remember the ramifications of that at all. I don't. I remember thinking about it. I remember the family talking about it. But very quickly thereafter, we got notification from chaplains, which explained how he died, where he died, how he was wounded, and so forth. So that very quickly passed as not possible.
I'm gonna cut it. And rolling. Okay, question number 7. What happened to you and your family after the war?
Well, I think that was the...
One second, sorry. You and or your family after the war.
Well, that's a long story, because the war ended in 45. And let's see, when I was 12, I joined the Boy Scouts. The thing I think I would probably have to say that I would have missed the most about my dad after the war was the fact that he liked to play baseball. I'm sure he would have done that with me. He loved to dance. Yeah. And he loved to have a good time. He played the guitar, he sang. Yeah, we had a pretty good time after the war on memories, and the big thing I think that Dad left both Tom and I, my brother, is the fact that we were able to go to college. We were given so much money every month as long as we were in school, and that, along with the fact that I could play some basketball, helped me go to college. And my brother Tom went to a junior college, and so there were some positives, if you want to call them positives. It's just a matter of losing your father, enabling you to do something because of that loss.
Okay. Number 8, this is the last question. So, what are your feelings today about your father's death in the service now that 70 or so years have passed? Just your honest feelings about it. Was it?
Well, I still have a feeling of pride. It's a matter of, after the fact, it's just what I was talking about before, the fact that only poor people die in wars. I could see that even in my young age of going to college, a lot of my buddies ended up going to Korea when we were in that police action or whatever it was. And because of my ability to play ball, I could go to college. And to me, at the time, I thought, boy, I'm pretty lucky. But after growing up and thinking about it, it just kind of set with me that it's just a further emphasis that poor people die in wars. If you don't have the capacity to get an education, you could very likely end up in a war, because that's probably the avenue you have to get away from wherever you are, is to join the army. That's basically, I think, from the war, that's what I ended up thinking about it. However, I was very proud of the fact that my dad was there.
Is there anything you want to add?
Pardon?
Is there anything you want to add? Just
No, I don't think so. Like I said, I'm still proud that my dad was in the invasion of France, and it's just an unfortunate thing that he had to be killed, that's all.
Can you expand upon what happened to him? I know he was interred in France somewhere, and then at some point in time they decided to bring him back. Why did that occur and all?
Well, yeah, there is a grave still in Brest, France, with a cross on it. I don't know where it is. If I ever thought of going to France, that would be the only reason I would go, to go to the grave in Brest. But I think about 1947 or 48, the Army notified us that if we wanted to, they would exhume the body and send him home, which we did. And he's buried in Faulkner in Pine Hill Cemetery. And that was done by, I would say, 95% of the people. They were given that authority to bring him back. So if you go into Faulkner and you go up at the cemetery, you'll see all of the names of most of the guys that were killed in the war from Faulkner. Quite a few of them.
so about what you were saying earlier to her.
Pardon?
About what you were saying earlier about the names on the walls. Can you retell that?
Yeah, well, actually it's in Jamestown, but it was started in Faulkner. It's called the Gaeta Club, and it was a social club. And within that club, on the upper walls around one of the rooms, there were pictures of all of the men from Faulkner who lost their lives in the war, in all the theaters, everywhere. And I'm guessing, I don't remember exactly, but I'm guessing there's between 12 and 15 men that were killed. Faulkner's a very small town, 3,000 people total. So that's quite a percentage. And the fact that those that served from that area, my Lord, I'm going to guess there was 100 young men that served in that area. There used to be a big plaque on Davis Park with the names of all the men who served. Now, of course, I'm sure some of them ended up wounded or something, but I know there were 12 to 15 of them that were actually lost their lives. But I think that's gone now, because I have the picture of my father that hung up there on that wall.
You want to say something?
Yeah. Do you remember VE Day or Victory? What happened in Faulkner and what your family did, where you were?
Yeah. VE Day, VJ Day. It was kind of subdued. It was not a big celebration. We didn't join in the big parties, and we could see down out of our apartment into the main street in Faulkner, the main four corners. There was a lot of jubilee and which there should have been, but it was not that way with our family. It was just the fact that, hell, thank God it's over. It wasn't neither one of them were happy days for us.
What was his address in Faulkner?
What was your address in Faulkner?
5 East Main Street. And we were 3 stories up to the top of the building. It was over the post office. And next to the bank that I ended up working for as a young man.
Where did Ed work then? Before you
yeah. What was your father's job? What was his occupation before he left?
My dad worked for Sterling Furniture Company. It was at that time it was a fairly small furniture manufacturing company, which Jamestown and Faulkner are noted for furniture manufacturing. And the thing that I remember the most was before Dad went into the service. This would be, I might be 7 years old, somewhere in that area. I think my dad made $12 a week, and that stuck with me forever. The fact that he was raising a family on $12 a week. And I remember going outside, and he had an old Model A Ford, and they were repossessing the tires off of it because he couldn't pay for them. But that was my dad. If he had the money, fine. If he didn't, that's okay too. Come and take my tires.
How many kids?
Oh yeah, how many kids were in your family? How many kids were in your immediate family?
Well, just 2, my sister and I.
Oh, you didn't have a brother?
Well, Tom was my dad's adopted son. But when he married my mom, he adopted Tom, which is very important that he did, because Tom then became eligible for all the benefits because of his death. But my sister, Nancy, and I were the only family members at the time prior to him being inducted.
So how old was Nancy in 44?
Nancy at the time of his death, I'm going to say was 7. Something like that, 7 or 8.
And
She's
Tom?
4 to 5 years younger than I am. And Tom's about the same age. I think Tom's 5 years younger than I am too. So they're about the same age.
What does his memories playing ball or the songs that he played and sang guitar? Did he sing some songs?
Oh yeah, do you remember any, you mentioned your dad played guitar. Do you have any memories of that at all?
Oh yeah. Yeah. When we lived with my aunt and uncle, Dykeman, over on Lake Erie on Route 5, I can remember my dad playing outside on the porch in the summertime and singing, and everybody singing, you know. Like I say, he was a happy-go-lucky guy.
What kind of songs did he play?
Oh, geez. All the old country western stuff. He was a Hank Williams fan. You wouldn't even know who Hank Williams is, but he was a Hank Williams fan, and he sang all of that stuff, all country.
So was he good? Do you remember?
He was good. Yeah, he's a pretty good singer. He was not a great guitar picker. He played chords. All he did is chord and sing with them. So, and at one time I never heard him, but I heard people talk about the fact that he had sung on the radio. I don't know what station. I have no idea. Over there would have had to have been maybe out of Westfield or Dunkirk or one of those places in New York State. I have no idea. Like I say, he just enjoyed life. It was just too short.
How did he end up, being blind in one eye and having this problem?
I have no idea, because he used to hunt. I can remember him going hunting, and he didn't shoot left-handed. He shot right-handed. Now, and maybe he had some sort of a situation that created a problem with his right eye.
But if he was blind, wouldn't they have 4F'd him? Wouldn't they have?
I have no idea. He was not an extremely healthy guy, but if you go back in the records, you'll find out that there was a lot of men drafted at that point in time, because when they were going to invade France, they knew they were going to lose thousands of men. And these men had to come from somewhere. I mean, it was unusual for a man he was 29, I think, when he was drafted, 30, I think, when he died. But he had a wife and 2 kids. That was not the norm. But there were a lot of guys that had families that were drafted. It's just the fact that when you're at that particular situation, you need bodies. And that's what they got, was bodies. A lot of dead bodies.
What was the name of, what did they call his condition that he had?
His eyes?
Well, his nervous condition that affected everything. His legs and
He had
his...
lumbago or something?
He had lumbago. That was somehow, I think, was brought on by basic training. He ended up in the hospital for some time during basic, and this lumbago in his legs was what was causing that. And they trained him to shoot left-handed, and I'm sure he shot all right from that standpoint.
What were the symptoms?
Yeah, what were the symptoms? Can you remember what exactly the disease affected?
No, because I didn't think there's anything wrong with him. He never complained about anything. He was a smoker. I don't remember him ever complaining about being sick. I mean, he went to work every day, and I don't remember anything about actually a condition that he had. I'm sure it couldn't have been too serious, or, maybe he wouldn't have been drafted.
How was Grandpa aware of any condition at all, and how did he know that?
So, then how, if you didn't know about them, if they weren't observable to you, when did you find out, and how did you find out about the symptoms?
Well, it was during basic. I mean, he wrote letters to Mom that explained that he had to go in the hospital for some time because of lumbago in his legs and having problems. They had to train him differently, to shoot differently.
So something happened.
Other than that, I know he complained about his legs when he was overseas too. But I don't know what happened to all those letters. I got a feeling that Mom threw them out. I just have that feeling because I have the one letter, but it was to my aunt, not to my mom. So, and he wrote a lot of letters to my mother. I know that because I've read them, but I don't know what happened to him.
Can't think.
Is there anything else you can remember? Anything at all?
No, I think I've probably pretty much covered everything you need to know, other than I have a good family now. I was lucky. I didn't have to go in the service.
Yeah, that's lucky. What were you saying?
Dad, once your dad left for basic, was that the time you noticed your life changed the most?
As a kid, no, I don't think anything changed for me then, really. I was still a kid, doing what a kid does. I think that it was just a matter of pride. My dad was going in the service and in the Army, and not realizing how serious that was. No, it didn't affect me, I don't think, at all.
Anything at all?
Yeah, thinking of your maybe a question about if he could go back, because Grandpa's buried here now, but I'd really like to go and see.
He said that.
He did, okay.
We're halfway through the tape, so we've got plenty of time, but I don't think right now there's anything I can think of.
Any more details or elaboration on Falconer, what it was like to grow up there before he lost his dad? Anything like that? No.
I guess I might as well. Can you remember what it was like for you growing up in Falconer? What the town was like? Or, who your friends were, where you went to school, things like that?
Faulkner's a real laid-back town, blue-collar town, mostly shop workers. Of course, we had doctors and lawyers, but it's basically, Faulkner's just a laid-back industrial type area, all shop workers mostly. Not many with any higher education. I would say 5% maybe of the workforce there would have been college-educated people. It's a nice area. Faulkner is a good place to raise a family. There's not a lot going on. Had pretty good school and good athletics teams. Friendly people. Just a nice, friendly little town.
So do you remember spending time with your dad, like summer days, or what would you do as a family before he left?
Not much, because my dad if he had a day off, he was either playing baseball or hunting or fishing, or that might have something to do with the fact that his first marriage didn't hang together, because he just was the kind of a guy that enjoyed life, and the only thing I remember with him the most is that him letting me drive or steer the old Model A Ford when he was out on the road. I used to sit on his lap. I probably was 7, 8 years old, and he used to let me steer the car down the road. It's a wonder we all didn't get killed. I don't know, but like I say, he was a laid-back, happy-go-lucky guy. He really was.
How did he end up finding Nana?
I have no idea, except for the fact that that Mom loved to dance. My dad loved to dance. I have a feeling they met at Linkworth Grill or someplace where they had music, and that's how they got together. I have no idea other than that. I can't imagine how they would have known. Well, they may have known each other forever. Faulkner's a small area.
Do you recall how old you were when they got married?
Yeah, I knew how old I was because I was already married. No, that's Mom and... I'm sorry, I'm relating to a different situation with Pop-Up. Let's see. When they got married,
Were you old enough to be aware of what was going on?
Yeah, I think I was probably 9, 10.
Oh, not long before he went to war then.
Oh, no. Because Dad and I lived alone for quite a few years after my maternal mother, Millie, left. We lived alone, or we lived with my aunt and uncle over on Lake Erie.
Where did you live when you lived alone with your dad? Where were you?
Oh, we lived in a little tiny flea-bitten apartment. was pretty bad. It might have had 2 rooms in it. I don't know. All I remember, it was dark and dingy, and a lot of tomato soup out of cans and crackers. But there again, because my dad was so effervescent and happy, I was happy too. I didn't realize that I didn't have much.
Where was that apartment?
The apartment, the last one that we lived in, was right directly behind the bank building, the First National Bank building, which would be right next door to where Mom was living with her mother and father after she got a divorce. And that could have been something there, I don't know. But it was a dingy, tiny little thing.
Two things. One, do you remember? I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember if there was a last dance between your father and your mother? Do you remember that at all?
I do not, son. I don't. I do not. They were dancing all the time. I mean, that was the only recreation they had. Normally, it was Friday or Saturday night because the local little pubs used to have dancing, either jukeboxes or small little combos would play, and that was their night out, was to go out and maybe have a bottle of beer and dance. But I don't remember their last dance, no. Nope.
How about Nana? How old was she when she started raising them? You know, how they could paint a picture about.
I'm sure they had their last dance, so.
So two things about Nana. How old were you when she started taking care of you, and how old was she?
Wow. Mom was about 24. I would guess when Dad married her, Dad was, 28, 29. And I was 10, something like that. Mom was only 14 years older than I was, which was a plus and a minus, because I was her recreation, so to speak. She used to take me and she taught me how to dance, so that was, she could still go out and dance. I was only, I don't know, 13, 14 when I learned how to dance and go dancing with my mother.
So when did she marry Papa then?
Ooh, 2 years after your grandma and I were married, 1955, I'm pretty sure, 55. So we were pretty close to then, the same amount of years married.
She spent about 10 years before she got married again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly right. I was trying to think. Yeah, she was, what, could have been more than 32 or 33, 34, something like that when she got married to Papa.
So,
Which was a really good thing. I mean, that was a good thing for our family because we didn't have Tom or I didn't have a male in the family. I was the senior male in our family for quite a while.
Maybe Grandpa could talk about that. Like, here's this, she's 24 years old, she's raising two boys that she pretty much adopted.
We could go on for a long time. However, we're really getting away from.
Well, it would explain how his life changed without a dad, like you told me.
Okay, we'll make that the last question.
Okay.
So after Nana started taking care of you, I think you might have answered this question a little bit, but how did your life change without your dad that you'd always known?
Well, Mom was very strict with me. Being one of the original single parent mothers with two young boys to take care of, she was very, very strict with me. I sort of had the nickname in high school of Cinderella because of the fact that I had to be home by 12 o'clock at night. No questions asked and no excuses. You'll be home at 12. So I kind of, that didn't bother me all that much anyways. I had a good life and I knew I had a good life, so her being strict with me didn't really bother me. I took a little ribbon, but that didn't bother me that much.
Alright. If there's nothing else, I will cut the film.